Hello there, Trace here, and today I'm going to show you for loops in Java. To use a for loop, we're going to type for, a set of parentheses, and then a pair of curly braces. And like usual, our code for the loop is going to go inside of these curly braces. For this example, I'm just going to use a simple system out print line statement, and I guess we'll just print test for this, that'll work fine. Moving on, we're going to be having three statements inside of these parentheses. It's a little bit more than the while loops and the do while loops where you just have one conditional statement, but it's really not more complicated. The first statement is going to execute once before the loop runs. It will never execute again. What's most commonly used here, and what I'm going to use for this example, is just initializing a variable. In this case, I. I don't know why the variable I is so commonly used in for loops, but it is, so that's why I'm going to use it in the example. The next part is going to be the conditional statement. You'll notice these are separated by semicolons. They're just three individual statements is what we're going to have on the same line, and they're going to end each with a semicolon. That's how the compiler is going to know that they are separate statements up here. The next one is going to be our conditional statement. In most cases, we're comparing the looping variable, in this case I, the one we've initialized here, to some sort of value. We're going to stick very simple. We'll go I is less than, we'll go with I is less than 3. Our last one, and by the way, when we talk about this conditional statement, it's going to run every time before the loop, the code inside the loop executes. This is going to be what comes back as true or false. If it's true, the code inside the loop will run. If it's false, it will not run and we'll move on to any code after the loop. So that's what the conditional statement is, just to be clear. Our final piece here is going to run every time after the loop executes. What that means is that basically we're going to go through, we're going to come, eventually get to our loop. It's going to first run this line where we initialize I, then run our conditional statement. If this is true, it will run this code. Then it will run this piece that we enter. In this case, we're just going to increment I. We'll go I plus plus, or we can even do plus plus I in this case. There are subtle differences, but overall it doesn't really matter. Then once we run this, we're going to check our conditional statement again. If that's still true, we will run this code again, run this line again, and then check this again. And we're going to keep doing that until this comes back as false, and we continue on after the loop. So let's see what this looks like. We run this. We'll see it prints out test 3 times because it's gone through. We'll walk through really quick. It came here, initialized I as 0, and then it went through, yep, 0 is less than 3, print this, add 1. So now I is 1. 1 is less than 3, print this, add 1. I is 2 now, so 2 is less than 3, print this, add 1. So we've printed 3 times, and now I has been incremented to 3. 3 is not less than 3, so we move on, we're done. So it makes sense why we printed out 3 times. The last thing I want to say about for loops is that when you initialize a variable here, it is local to that loop, within that loop. So I really only exists in this domain. Why is this important? This is important because if you have a variable that you initialize within that for loop and you try using it outside the for loop, let's say down here we want to system out print line. Let's say we want to print the value of I, and you might do that expecting to print out 3 when this is done because 3 would be the value at which this loop finishes executing and we move on. But instead we're going to get an error because I actually does not exist. It can't be resolved to a variable because it's local to the scope of this loop. So it's one thing to keep in mind when you're doing for loops, is that the variable you declare here, if you do decide to declare a variable there, is going to be local to the scope of that loop. So that's about all I've got. For loops are pretty simple, pretty easy. If you have any other questions or comments or anything, please do leave them in the comments below the video. I really appreciate you watching, and I do hope you have a great rest of your day. See you again soon.